They found him at dawn, collapsed in the frost-covered clearing, with no memory of who he was or what he'd done. Sera recognized him immediately, the silver scar running from temple to jaw, the broadness of his shoulders, the way, even unconscious, his presence commanded the space around him like gravity bending light. Dante, alpha of the Shadow Ridge Pack. The monster who'd murdered her brother. Her hands trembled as she pressed 2 fingers to his throat, feeling the steady thrum of his pulse. Still alive, still breathing. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 2 years praying for his death, and now fate delivered him to her doorstep, vulnerable and broken. Sera, her neighbor, old Marcus, appeared through the morning mist. "What in the gods' names? Help me get him inside," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness in her voice. Marcus's weathered face twisted with confusion. "That's Dante, the alpha, the one who... I know who he is." The words tasted like ash. Her brother's funeral had been 2 winters ago. His body torn apart in a territorial dispute Dante had orchestrated. Sera had been forced to identify what remained. She still dreamed about it, still woke with her brother's blood on her hands, though it had never really been there. She should let Dante freeze, should let the forest reclaim what it had spit out. But something stopped her. Perhaps it was the way his fingers curled against the frozen ground, seeking warmth. Perhaps it was the blood matting his dark hair, the vulnerability in the slack line of his jaw. Or perhaps it was simply that Sera had seen enough death to last a lifetime, and even monsters deserved a choice before they died. They dragged him into her cottage, his weight substantial even between 2 people. Inside, the fire crackled low, casting amber shadows across the rough-hewn walls. Sera had built this sanctuary herself. After her exile from the pack, lands a small rebellion against those who'd told her to remarry, to forget, to move on. She'd chosen isolation instead, chosen grief over pretense. Now that isolation felt like a trap closing around her throat. When Dante's eyes finally opened hours later, they held no recognition, no cruelty, just confusion and pain, painfully, devastatingly human. "Where?" His voice cracked. He tried to sit up, winced, and fell back against the pillows. "Who are you?" Sera's heart hammered against her ribs. She could tell him everything. Could watch understanding dawn, watch the monster remember itself, watch him become what he was before, ruthless, calculating, deadly. Or, "My name is Sera," she said quietly. "You're safe here. You had an accident." An accident. He repeated the words slowly, as if testing their weight. His hand rose to touch the scar on his face, tracing it with careful fingers. I can't remember. What's your name?" she asked, though she knew. Gods, she knew. His brow furrowed with concentration. Seconds stretched into minutes. Finally, he shook his head, something raw and frightened flickering in his eyes. "I don't know. I don't remember anything." The fire popped, a small explosion of sparks. "You're bleeding," Sera said, gesturing to the wound at his temple. "Let me clean it." She moved to gather supplies, her hands shaking so badly she had to grip the edge of the table to steady herself. Behind her, Dante the Alpha, who'd destroyed everything she loved, sat helpless in her home, stripped of the very thing that made him dangerous. His memory, his identity, his monstrousness. What would he become without them? 3 days passed in careful silence. Sera watched Dante the way one watches a sleeping wolf, with caution and fascination in equal measure. He moved through her small cottage like a shadow learning to inhabit flesh, his amnesia rendering him gentle where he'd once been brutal, uncertain where he'd once commanded with absolute authority. It unsettled her, undid her. "Tell me about this place," he said on the 4th morning, standing at her window as dawn bled gold across the snow. His reflection in the glass looked haunted, searching. "About the forest, about anything. Everything feels like a story someone else lived." Because it was. Because the man standing before her wasn't really Dante, not the Dante who'd ordered her brother's death with clinical detachment. This was someone softer, someone who asked questions instead of making demands, who flinched at loud noises and looked at her with gratitude instead of entitlement. This was a lie, a beautiful, terrible lie. "The forest is old," Sera said, joining him at the window. She kept careful distance between them, a buffer zone of safety. "Older than the packs, older than the grudges we carry. Some say it remembers everything we choose to forget. Do you believe that?" She thought of her brother's laughter, of blood on snow, of the way Dante's voice had sounded that day, cold, final, utterly devoid of mercy. "Yes," she whispered. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. There was kindness there. Real, genuine kindness, in eyes that had once been winter cold and calculating. "You saved me," he said simply. "I don't know why, and I don't know how to repay you, but I need you to know I feel it. The debt. It's like weight pressing against my chest. Debt." The word struck her like a physical blow. He owed her nothing. She owed him less than nothing. And yet here they stood, bound together by circumstances neither had chosen, playing roles in a story that had already been written in blood. "You don't owe me anything," Sera said, her voice barely audible. "Then why do I feel like I do?" Dante's hand lifted, as if to touch her face, then dropped. The gesture was so uncertain, so unlike the commanding alpha he'd been, that something cracked in Sera's carefully constructed defenses. "Why do I feel like I've been looking for you my entire life, and I just forgot?" The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and magnetic. "Because you have been looking for me," she wanted to say. "You've haunted my nightmares for 2 years. You're the monster under my bed, the shadow in my peripheral vision, the reason I wake screaming." But looking at him now, at this lost, gentle man who didn't remember being a monster, the words wouldn't come. "Rest," she said instead, stepping back, creating distance, building walls. "You're still recovering." That night, Sera lay awake listening to Dante's breathing from the other room. She'd given him her brother's old space, the room she'd left untouched like a shrine to the dead. It felt wrong, sacrilegious even, to have the man who'd destroyed her family sleeping where her brother once slept. But Dante didn't know that, couldn't know that, and neither could he know that just before midnight, Sera rose and stood in his doorway, watching the rise and fall of his chest, watching him sleep with the innocence of someone who'd never killed, never ordered deaths, never broken anything he couldn't repair. Her fingers found the knife at her belt, the one she'd carried every day since her brother's funeral. She could end it now, end him. No one would blame her. The monster delivered to her door, vulnerable and helpless. Justice, served cold. But as she watched him sleep, something twisted in her chest, something that felt dangerously close to doubt. What if monsters weren't born? What if they were made? And what if, stripped of their memories, they could be unmade just as easily? The storm came sudden and vicious, turning the world beyond Sera's cottage into a howling white nightmare. Inside, the fire burned low. Supplies dwindled, and Dante grew restless. "I should hunt," he announced on the second day of the storm, pacing the small space like a caged animal. Something in his movements was too fluid, too predatory. Muscle memory, perhaps. The beast remembering what the man had forgotten. "In this?" Sera gestured to the window, where snow piled in drifts taller than a man. "You'd be dead within an hour. I'm stronger than I look." "You look plenty strong," she muttered, then cursed herself for noticing, for caring. "That doesn't mean you're invincible." He stopped pacing, fixed her with those two intense eyes. "You don't trust me." It wasn't a question. "I don't know you," Sera said carefully. It was both truth and lie. She knew him intimately, knew the shape of his cruelty, the sound of his voice giving orders that would end in blood. But this version? This gentle, uncertain man, he was a stranger. "Then let me prove myself." Dante moved closer, each step measured, non-threatening. "Let me do something useful. Chop wood. Fix the roof. Something. The roof's fine." "Is it?" He tilted his head, listening. After a moment, Sera heard it too, the soft drip, drip, drip of melting snow finding cracks, seeping through. Damn. They climbed into the cramped attic together, Dante moving with surprising grace despite his recent injuries. Up here, surrounded by old boxes and forgotten memories, the space felt too intimate, too close. There, Dante said, pointing to a gap in the woodwork. I can patch that. Do you have... The beam beneath him gave a warning creak, then simply surrendered. Everything happened in fragments. Dante falling. Sera lunging forward without thought, her hands finding his arm. The sudden, shocking weight of him pulling them both down. They crashed into boxes, into dust, into each other. Dante twisted mid-fall, taking the brunt of the impact, his arms instinctively wrapping around her to cushion her landing. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Sera lay sprawled across his chest, her ear pressed against where his heart thundered like war drums. His arms remained locked around her waist, protective even in chaos. She could feel every inch of him solid, warm, alive, dangerous. Are you hurt? His voice rumbled through his chest, vibrating against her cheek. She should move, should put distance between them immediately. Instead, she lifted her head and found his face inches from hers, close enough to see gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to feel his breath ghost across her lips. Sera, he whispered, and her name had never sounded like that before, like a prayer, like a plea. I'm fine, she managed, but didn't pull away. His hand rose, fingers hovering near her face. May I? She should say no. Should remember who he was, what he'd done. Should let hate be her shield. But she nodded. His fingertips brushed her temple, gentle as rain, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it hurt, made her chest tight, made her forget, just for a moment, that the man touching her with such reverence was the same man who'd destroyed her world. I don't know who I was before, Dante said softly, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. But I know who I want to be now. Someone worthy of your kindness. Someone who deserves the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. How do I look at you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Like you're trying to decide whether I'm worth saving. Sera's throat constricted, because he was right. Because every moment she spent with him was a decision, a choice, a betrayal of everything she'd sworn to remember. And what if you're not? She whispered. Dante's expression turned achingly vulnerable. Then at least I'll have this moment, with you. The storm raged on outside, but in the wreckage of the attic, surrounded by broken boxes and splintered wood, something shifted, changed, became dangerous in entirely new ways. Sera pulled away finally, stood on shaking legs. We should get you downstairs. Make sure nothing's broken. But as she helped him up, as their hands touched and held longer than necessary, she knew the truth. Something was already broken. Had been from the moment she'd chosen to save him, and she had no idea how to repair it. The days blurred into a rhythm that felt stolen, dangerous, like living inside someone else's dream. Sera taught Dante to cook her brother's recipes without meaning to muscle memory, guiding her hands as she showed him how to season the stew, how to knead bread until it became silk under his palms. He learned quickly, his hands deft and careful, so different from what she'd imagined. Monsters shouldn't bake bread, she thought, watching him work. Shouldn't hum softly while washing dishes. Shouldn't ask permission before everything. As if the world were made of glass, and he'd forgotten how to touch it without breaking. Tell me a story, Dante said one night as they sat by the fire, the space between them shrinking by degrees. About you. About before. Before. The word was a cliff's edge. What do you want to know? Everything. Nothing. Anything that helps me understand why you're kind to a stranger who could be anyone. Could be. Dangerous. If only he knew. I had a brother, Sera heard herself say, the words scraping out like broken glass. He was everything good. Everything I'm not. That's not true. You don't know me. Then tell me. Dante shifted closer. Just an inch. Then another. Let me know you. So she did. Not all of it, not the truth that mattered most, but fragments. Pieces. She told him about growing up on the edges of the pack, about loving a brother who'd been born for greatness, while she'd been born for nothing. About the day she'd been exiled for refusing to mate with someone she didn't love, for choosing loneliness over duty. They said I was selfish, Sera whispered, staring into the flames. Maybe they were right. Or maybe, Dante said quietly, they didn't understand that choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. She looked at him then, really looked, and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't name. Something tender. Something that made her chest ache. "What about you?" she asked. "What do you remember? Anything?" Dante's jaw tightened. "Fragments. Nothing that makes sense. Sometimes I dream about blood, battle, authority." His hands clenched in his lap. "I dream about violence, Sera. About cruelty. And I wake up terrified that those dreams are memories. That whoever I was before, he was someone terrible." The confession hung between them, raw and honest. "And what if he was?" Sera asked, her heart hammering. "What if you were terrible? Would that change who you are now?" "I don't know," Dante admitted. "Does it? Can people really change? Or are we just always running from who we've always been?" It was the same question she'd been asking herself since the day she saved him. The same question that kept her awake at night, watching him sleep, wondering if forgiveness was possible, or if she was just a fool playing at redemption. "I think," Sera said slowly, "that people are the stories they tell themselves. And maybe, if we change the story, we change everything." "Then help me write a new one," Dante said, reaching for her hand. His fingers trembled slightly as they wove through hers. "Help me be someone worth knowing." She should pull away, should remember, should let the truth be the wall between them. But his hand was warm, and her grief was cold. And for the first time in 2 years, Sera felt something other than emptiness. Felt possibility, felt hope, felt the dangerous, intoxicating pull of something that felt dangerously close to forgiveness. That night, she dreamed of her brother. But instead of reproach in his eyes, she found understanding. "Maybe," the dream brother whispered, "some monsters deserve a second chance." She woke with tears on her face, and Dante's hand still holding hers, their fingers intertwined even in sleep. And she knew, with terrible certainty, that she was falling in love with the man who'd killed everything she'd once loved. The betrayal tasted like heartbreak. It tasted like coming home. The thaw came gradually. Then all at once ice surrendering to sun, snow melting into streams that carried winter away like a forgotten promise. And with the thaw came visitors. Sera heard the howls first, distant but drawing closer. Pack sounds, familiar, threatening. Dante stiffened beside her, his head tilting as instinct recognized what memory had forgotten. "What is that?" "Nothing," she lied, but her hands shook as she moved toward the door. "Stay inside. Sera, please." The word came out desperate. "Just trust me. Stay hidden." She met them at the tree line, 3 wolves from Shadow Ridge Pack, their eyes hard and hungry. When they shifted to human form, she recognized their faces. Had known them once, in another lifetime. "We're looking for our alpha," the lead wolf said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Dante, he disappeared weeks ago. You've seen him?" Every instinct screamed at her to lie, to protect, to keep the man she'd fallen for safe from the monster he'd been. "No," Sera said, meeting their eyes with practiced calm. "I've been alone all winter." They didn't believe her. She could see it in the way they circled, scenting the air, reading the truth her words tried to hide. "Interesting," the wolf said, stepping closer. "Because we can smell him. Alpha scent. Strong. Recent." His smile was cruel. "You know what happened to the last person who lied to protect someone from the pack?" She did. Had witnessed the punishment herself. Had vomited afterward, unable to stomach the violence. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sera said, but her voice wavered. Behind her, the cabin door opened. "No. Gods. No." Dante stepped onto the porch, his posture protective, territorial. He didn't remember them that much, was clear from his expression, but his body remembered dominance. remembered command, remembered violence. She said she's alone, Dante said, his voice dropping into something darker, something that made the wolves take a step back. I suggest you respect that. The lead wolf's eyes widened. Alpha? What happened to you? I don't know who you think I am, Dante said slowly. But you're trespassing. Leave, now. You don't remember. Understanding dawned on the wolf's face, followed by something calculating. Dangerous. Alpha, you had an accident. A head injury during the last territorial dispute. You've been missing for weeks. We've been searching. Liar. Sera breathed, but it was too late. Dante's hand rose to touch the scar on his temple, his expression shifting, memories flickering behind his eyes like lightning, fragments assembling, reality reshaping itself into something terrible. Dante, Sera said, moving toward him. Don't listen to them, whatever they're saying. Territorial dispute, Dante repeated, his voice hollow. I remember. Blood. Orders. Someone's brother. His eyes snapped to Sera, suddenly sharp, suddenly knowing. Your brother. You said he died in a territorial dispute. The world tilted. Dante. Tell me I'm wrong. His voice cracked. Tell me I didn't, that I wasn't. We should go, Alpha, the lead wolf said, sensing opportunity. Come home. Let us help you remember everything. Everything? Dante whispered, looking at his hands like they belonged to someone else, like they were stained with invisible blood. His gaze lifted to Sera, and in his eyes, she saw the moment the gentleman she'd fallen for recognized the monster he'd been. Gods, what did I do? You didn't know, Sera said desperately, reaching for him. You don't remember. You're not him anymore. Aren't I? Dante stumbled back, away from her touch. You knew. This whole time, you knew what I was, who I'd killed. And you just let me believe I could be someone else. You are someone else. The words tore from her throat. You're not the man who killed my brother. You're not the Alpha who destroys everything he touches. You're kind and gentle and a lie. Dante's laugh was broken. I'm a lie you told yourself because it was easier than hating me. That's not true, isn't it? He looked at her. Really looked. And Sera saw the moment he decided. Saw the walls go up. Saw the gentleman retreat behind the armor of the Alpha. I need to leave. I need to. I can't be here. Can't be near you. Can't. Please, Sera whispered, tears streaming down her face. Don't go. Don't let them take you back to being that person. Maybe that person is all I ever was, Dante said, his voice distant, cold. The Alpha's voice, not the man's. Maybe everything else was just a dream we both needed to believe. He left with the wolves, walking away without looking back, without hesitation. And Sera stood alone in the clearing, watching the only man she'd ever loved choose to become the monster who destroyed her world. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She'd saved him, only to lose him twice. 2 weeks passed like years. Sera moved, through her days mechanical, hollow, half alive. The cottage felt too large without him, too empty. Every corner held ghosts, his laugh, his hands kneading bread, the way he'd look at her like she was something precious instead of broken. She told herself it was better this way, told herself she'd been living a fantasy, falling for a fiction. That the real Dante, the Alpha, the killer, was back where he belonged, and she could finally grieve properly. But grief, she learned, had many faces, and some of them looked like longing. The message came at dawn, carried by a young wolf she didn't recognize, a single piece of paper, folded precisely. He's changing, becoming worse than before. If you ever loved him, come. Lyra, Dante's sister. They'd met once, years ago, before everything fell apart. Sera should ignore it, should let the Alpha become whatever monster he chose. She'd done her part, saved his life. She owed him nothing more. But as she read the message again, as she thought of the gentleman who'd learned to bake bread and ask permission before touching, something in her chest twisted tight. What if she'd been wrong? What if walking away wasn't healing but hiding? What if real courage meant facing the monster and choosing to love him anyway? The Shadow Ridge Pack territory looked the same as she remembered: imposing, dangerous, built to intimidate. Guards stopped her at the border, their eyes hard with recognition. "Sera Thorne," one said, his voice dripping contempt. "You're not welcome here. I need to see the Alpha. He doesn't want—" "Let her through." Lyra appeared from the shadows, her expression grim. "He won't see her willingly, but he needs to." Lyra led her through winding corridors, past pack members who stared with open hostility. Finally, they stopped outside a heavy oak door. "He's been cruel," Lyra said quietly. "Worse than before. It's like losing his memory showed him what he could be, and remembering showed him what he is. He's punishing himself. Punishing everyone. Why tell me this? Because I watched you two together. Saw the way he looked at you. Like you were his second chance." Lyra's hand gripped the door handle. "He needs to know second chances are still possible. Even for monsters." She opened the door before Sera could respond. Dante stood at the window, his posture rigid, every inch the Alpha. But when he turned, when their eyes met, Sera saw past the armor, saw the man beneath, wounded and lost. "What are you doing here?" His voice was flat, carefully controlled. "Saving you," Sera said simply. "Again. I don't need saving. I need—" His jaw clenched. "You should go. Before I do something we'll both regret." "Like what?" She moved closer, ignoring every instinct screaming at her to run. "Like showing emotion? Like admitting you're more than the monster you think you have to be?" "I killed your brother," Dante said, the words sharp as knives. "I ordered his death without hesitation. That's who I am. That's who I'll always be." "No." Sera closed the distance between them, her hands finding his face. "That's who you were, past tense. You're not that person anymore. How can you say that?" His voice broke. "How can you stand here, touching me, when my hands—" "Because I know you," Sera interrupted, her thumbs tracing his cheekbones. "I know the man who learned to bake bread, who asked permission before everything, who held me like I was something precious. That man is real, just as real as the Alpha. And if I hurt you, if the beast comes back and then I'll fight," Sera said fiercely. "I'll fight for you, for us, for the possibility that love can be stronger than hate. That forgiveness can be stronger than revenge." Dante's hands rose, trembling, to cover hers. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she agreed, smiling through tears. "But I'm choosing you anyway. I'm choosing us. I'm choosing to believe that monsters can change if someone loves them, enough to show them how." "Sera," he whispered, and her name sounded like salvation, like coming home. "Come back," she pleaded. "Not to the cottage, not to hiding. Come back to yourself, to the man you were learning to be. Let me help you write that new story we talked about." For a moment, nothing. Then Dante pulled her close, his forehead pressing to hers, his breath ragged with suppressed emotion. "I'm afraid," he confessed. "Afraid of hurting you. Afraid of being the monster." "Then be afraid," Sera said, her arms wrapping around him. "But be afraid with me. Let me love you through it. That's not fair to you. Love isn't fair. It's just necessary." He kissed her then, desperate, grateful, terrified. And Sera kissed him back, tasting salt and hope and the dangerous possibility of redemption. Outside, the moon rose full and bright. Inside, a monster learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let yourself be loved. The change didn't happen overnight. Couldn't. But it happened. Dante stepped down from his position as Alpha, passing leadership to someone gentler, someone who led with wisdom instead of fear. The pack resisted at first. Change always faces resistance, but slowly they adapted, evolved, became something new. Sera stayed, not in the pack lands, but close enough. She and Dante built a life between worlds, hers in the cottage where she'd saved him, his in the healing process that felt both endless and essential. Some days were hard. Days when memory returned in vivid, terrible detail. Days when Dante woke screaming, when the weight of his past actions threatened to crush him. On those days, Sera held him while he shattered, then helped him piece himself back together. "You don't have to do this," he told her once, his voice raw from nightmares. "Don't have to carry my sins." "I'm not carrying them," Sera said gently. "I'm standing beside you while you learn to put them down. There's a difference?" All the difference. Months became seasons. Seasons became years. And slowly, carefully, Dante learned to forgive himself. Learned that atonement wasn't a destination, but a journey. That being worthy didn't mean being perfect. It meant trying, failing, trying again. Sera learned too. Learned that loving someone didn't mean forgetting what they'd done. It meant seeing them fully, the light and the shadow, and choosing them anyway. Her brother would have understood, she thought. Would have seen the strange poetry in his sister falling for the man who'd destroyed her, then saved her by letting himself be saved. Would have approved. One evening, 5 years after the day she'd found Dante in the frost, they sat by the fire in their cottage. Their home, built from forgiveness and hope and the stubborn belief that people could change if given the chance. "Do you ever regret it?" Dante asked, his fingers tracing patterns on her palm. "Choosing me? Every day," Sera said honestly, then smiled at his expression. I regret that it took me so long, that I wasted time hating when I could have been loving, that I almost let fear win, but not the choice itself. Never the choice itself." He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a tenderness that still made her breath catch. "I love you," he said simply. "I don't say it enough, but I do. I love who you made me brave enough to become." "I didn't make you anything," Sera corrected gently. "You did the work. I just reminded you that you were worth saving." "We saved each other," Dante said, pulling her close. "That's how it works, isn't it? Real love. Not one person rescuing another, but both of them choosing to be braver together than they ever were alone." Sera settled against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heart. Outside, snow began to fall soft, quiet, beautiful. "Tell me a story," Dante murmured into her hair. "What kind?" "One about us. About monsters and the people who love them. About how forgiveness is the bravest kind of magic." So she did. She told him about a man who forgot he was a monster, and a woman who helped him remember he was human. About how love wasn't about erasing the past, but about refusing to let it write the future. She told him about redemption, about mercy, about the strange, beautiful truth that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones who teach us the most about healing. And as she spoke, as Dante's breathing deepened into sleep, Sera thought about all the stories she'd never written, all the endings she'd imagined that looked nothing like this. She'd expected tragedy, had prepared for heartbreak. But fate, it seemed, had other plans, because sometimes monsters do change. Sometimes love does win. Sometimes the most unlikely stories are the ones that end in grace. And sometimes, when you save a monster, you find out you were saving yourself all along. The fire burned low. The snow continued falling. And two people broken in different ways, healed by unlikely means, slept peacefully, wrapped in each other, and the quiet miracle of second chances. The end. Thank you for listening to The Alpha Who Forgot He Was a Monster. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.